Thymesia is often related to hyperthymesia. Hyperthymesia is Greek in origin, with thymesia being related to memory, and hyper being somewhat self-explanatory. Hyperthymesia therefore is exceptional memory, or in other words eidetic memory, is the ability to recall most everything with almost perfect accuracy, which would come in handy as Thymesia the game is forgettable. The main notes that come to mind is it's repetitive and the blood enemies suck. Everything else is a weird blur. Thymesia the game is a Soulsborne type game, which is putting it nicely as it's more the bastard child of Bloodborne and Sekiro, with Dark Souls 2 just sitting in the corner and watching. The story is quite forgetful. From what I understood or cared to understand, the world has bad blood and good blood. Bad blood makes people into mutants, and good blood cures super COVID or something like that. This town was filled with cases of bad blood zombie mutants, and yes, it sounds like Bloodborne. It's basically the Bloodborne plot. They tried to make it different. Instead of being gothic, it leaned more into the classic medieval castle-style architecture. There's only 4 maps you actually get to look at, that is. It's very limited, and to help pad out the gameplay, you often revisit the same area 2 to 3 times. Reusing seems to be the common theme. Where the small instance of Dark Souls 2 comes into play, it's because nearly every enemy is a knight or some commoner with farming equipment. 9 times out of 10, you'll be fighting something like that. Some of the bosses and enemies kind of break this trend, but they're far and few between when it's all knights and peasants. It's The combat doesn't do much to break this trend either. It tries to be its own thing, but it's so close to Sekiro, yet just misses the mark of what made it fun and challenging to me. I know Sekiro isn't everyone's cup of tea, but to me, Sekiro was more of a duel, having to deflect, land a few blows in, and manage your own deflect gauge all at the same time. Meanwhile, in Thymesia, there's no stamina, there's no deflect gauge. You just stab until the enemy gets hyper armor, then you spam deflect. Of course, at first, deflecting is hard to do, because it feels like you get half a frame, and a good chunk of the enemies don't telegraph too well. But then you get the upgrade, which makes it last much longer, and most fights you can get by just by spamming deflect and clawing at the enemy like a deranged cat. I spend a good chunk of time in the game just standing still in front of an enemy, either clawing at them or deflecting, with only 2 ways the game switches it up. One way is they make it so the enemies are paced differently, or they have special critical attacks, which is like maybe 4 or 5 guys really actually have this and use it from memory. And when it comes to different pacing, it's, only a few of the bosses. Then they give almost all the bosses this unblockable ultimate move, and you have to be out of range, but you're a close range fighter, so you just really have to take it on the chin and hope you have full health. Unless you're fighting that mutated circus ringleader who glitched out on me 3 times, so I had to restart the fight. Kudos to him for that. As I said before, the story and the atmosphere are very Bloodborne inspired. It's all about tainted blood and not pure blood. It's not as interesting. Bloodborne was vague, especially at the end, where you didn't know really just what you did. Either that you're leaving the nightmare, or you've become God. The endings of Thymesia, the 2 I got at least, were shit is still terrible, or shit's not that bad, all things considered, and it might get better. I don't recommend the game. If you really want to play it, just get a mediocre drug trip going and do simultaneous playthroughs of Bloodborne and Sekiro while watching Dark Souls 2 playthroughs in the background.